3, 2, 1.
Here we go!
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Let's Dig In podcast. I'm your host, Chef Rich Rosendale. And this week we are on episode number 48. And we actually have a very good friend of mine and somebody that I worked with at the Greenbrier. And actually I met at the Greenbrier. His name is Heath Porter. He has Heathen wine tours. He also has his own extraordinary wine blend. It's called Heathen. We carry it at Roots and I use it for a lot of different events. And really, Heath, I got to tell you, of all the sommeliers and people that I've worked with that are in the wine world, he really makes you feel like super comfortable, regardless of what kind of wine you like, what you know about wine. He's very charismatic and funny, and you never know what he's going to say. Sometimes that can get us into trouble, but I'm sure we'll have no problem on this episode. We also real quick want to say thank you to our sponsors. This season, we have our title sponsor is Waring Commercial. They played a big role in the opening of our new restaurant, R3 Rosendale Concepts in Atlanta, and also Ovention Ovens. They specialize in these very powerful speed ovens that are hoodless, electric technology, really incredible. And of course, an ongoing partner of the show, Miele. We use those in our home kitchens and cooking demonstrations and really all of their equipment. I'm a big fan of Miele. And also Well-Built and their whole collection of products that they make have been a big supporter over the years. And also Steel Light International, all the different plateware, serviceware that we use, and Dry Ager, best dry agers on the planet. Big fan. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dig into the show with my good friend, Heath Porter. Cool, Heath. Hey, man, good to see you, and thanks for carving out some time. I know you've been traveling, obviously, doing all the various things. We're going to get into that with your wine tours and your new line with the wine, Heathen wine that's come out, which I've, of course, been a big fan of. But Heath, for our viewers, our audience, those that may not be familiar with you, if you can kind of give them an overview about yourself and kind of how you got into the wine industry.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me on, Chef. I mean, I'm surprised you could make time for me between Daniel Boulud and Grant and David Burke. And, it's like, oh, somebody didn't show up, so let's call Heath the wine guy. Here we go.
No, man, no. I've been planning on having you on the show, man. I always enjoy talking with you, and I think you always bring something to the party. So
yeah, usually booze, so that's why I get invited back a lot. Yeah, so geez. I got into the wine world and the booze world, like 25 plus years ago. I started washing dishes at a truck stop when I was in high school because I was in trouble with the law, and I had to pay a bunch of people off, or I was going to go to the boys' home and get kicked out of school. And I still never went to college and sort of stuck in the business, and so eventually found my way into the wine world, which, funny enough, I grew up in a dry county with a teetotaling parents, and booze wasn't allowed in the house. And
wow.
I grew up in a dry county in Coleman, Alabama, surrounded with rednecks and Southern Baptists, and it drove me to drink for a living. So it's a true story, man. So yeah, here I am. I don't know, 30 years later.
Well, and a lot of people, I always like to share with our audience, because a lot of guests that we bring on the show, generally there's usually some kind of history there, whether they're people that I've cooked with or worked with or vendors, what have you. But you and I obviously spent a lot of time together at the Greenbrier, which was a crazy time. I guess there's a lot of adjectives, a lot of different ways you could explain that. Sometimes it was, stressful, crazy, exciting, what have you. But you were the director of wine there, and also spent a lot of time at, I believe it was Sea Island. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. I was at Sea Island for 5+ years before I was scooped up, poached, kidnapped to the Greenbrier, the Jolly G, and then came up in the business straight out of high school in Hawaii for 14 years. And that's where I learned the trade of food and booze and hospitality and pissing people off with a smile on my face. So, all the superpowers I still hold true to my heart these days.
And just to even kind of give a little more, shine a little more light on some of our history. Also, after the Greenbrier, you and I continued to do various wine dinners and stuff together, stuff for Merrill Lynch, Ocean Reef, different wine tastings, wine dinners. And I'm kind of curious, just, before we kind of get into some of the details about, I wanted to talk to you about, people that might be a little intimidated about picking wine, some various tips and stuff like that. But before I get into that, I'm kind of curious because, you kind of went in, I guess maybe in a lot of ways, there's some parallels to both of us where worked in those big entities, the juggernaut, if you will, of a hospitality with like the likes of the Greenbrier and Sea Island. But then you kind of went a different direction, kind of more down the road of, entrepreneurial, more small business kind of building your own. I mean, what was, did you kind of see in your mind's eye at some point that you wanted to do that? Because there's a lot of people that listen, a lot of our audience that will, they're kind of right on the fence, or maybe they're in that period in their career where they're thinking about, man, this is what I'd really like to do, but hey, this is what pays the bills. What was kind of the the tipping point, if you will, that you decided to kind of go a different direction?
Oh man, there had to be a couple of million of them to say the least. I opened up two restaurants, a super geeky wine bar and a crazy ass Chinese restaurant in Miami after I left the Greenbrier with business partners. But I was the managing partner and director, and that was stupid. So then, yeah, I moved on to doing my own entrepreneurial stuff so I could just work by myself. So I guess the short answer is probably I couldn't get another real job after the Greenbrier. Nobody wanted to hire me. So, uh, and I am incredibly unemployable to this day. I mean, just ask anybody. I could not have a job again to save my life. Nobody wants me around. Nobody wants to put up with this mouth. So, so I think in the back of my head, I remember being a kid before I even had a concept about wine and or anything like that. I just remember I always wanted just to have my own business. I never knew what it was going to be. I don't know what. I think when I was a kid, I think I grew up thinking I was going to be a lawyer just because I'm a loudmouth and I like to argue and be right about everything. And then I found drugs and booze in my teenage years, and I went down a different direction. But I think in my back of my head, I always thought I wanted to be my own boss and an entrepreneur. I just didn't know what direction I was going to go. And after running for those or working for those huge entities, and you did the same thing yourself. After working for those huge entities, I always sat around thinking, man, I don't see eye to eye with a lot of these things. I don't understand why I'm being told this. I don't understand. I'm looking at the P&L. This doesn't make sense to me. And I had my own ideas. And a lot of times I thought it was, okay, you're not happy because you're working for morons and with people who just don't understand the business. And then I got out and was doing it myself and realized I was also a moron. But just finally got to the point. Finally got to the point that I just wanted to not have employees, and I didn't want to answer to anybody. And I was just like, if somebody's going to call you an idiot, it's going to be you looking in the mirror every morning. Right. It's not going to be anybody else. And I've always been a guy who'd roll the dice on me. If I'm making $40,000 a year or $40 million a year, if I'm the one doing it, I'll take the chance. And that's just sort of what prompted a lot of it. That you got to remember, I drink a lot, so I mean, I get paid to drink. So I mean, stupid ideas happen. I mean, I think you were drinking when you invited me on this show, for crying out loud, Chef. So I mean, so I'm sure I didn't answer the question, but that's what I got. So.
No, well, and also I think it's very illustrating. You can see why I love inviting Heath to a lot of the wine dinners. One of the things I've always, I have a lot of friends that are sommeliers and people that they know wine, but I feel like the thing that over the years in working with you is I feel like you've continued to take a lot of the pretentiousness, the intimidation, and it's kind of like, hey, and we're going to get into even talking about, drinking wine with like barbecue and burgers. And I feel like a lot of people, when you have a conversation with them that might historically be, beer drinkers or, cocktails, what have you, it's almost like wine. Sometimes it's like, it could be intimidating, or it kind of has that highbrow kind of stigma associated with it. And, having you go and do like a really high end, California wine dinner with me and saying, hey, let's have fun and everybody loosen up, and here's a great course and here's what I put with it and why. I think that really kind of is, one of the qualities I've always kind of thought about you. And I think it's, it makes it approachable to people. What kind of people, well, tell us a little bit about the wine tours that you do. Where are some of the places you go, and what kind of people go to those? Because I feel like, even as I do a lot of cooking classes and stuff, and now more than ever, not only are we getting like professionals that go and take those classes, but they're also just people just really love food. And I feel like there probably is a lot of those same kind of people that I could see, embarking on one of the wine tours. But kind of tell us a little bit about what those are all about.
Yeah, no, thanks. Well, first of all, really rich people. That's obviously the first people we take. It's just like dripping of Prada and money. They are number one. They're guaranteed. All right. So, no, it's which means nobody I know is ever going to go. So, it's people that want access to things that I can provide that nobody else really has. A lot of tours, and either culinary tours or wine tours or whatever, it's very same. It's Noah's Ark, 2x2, 500 people, the leader's holding a flag up, it's like, and they're getting the same experience of the same 500 people got the week before, they got the week before, they got the week before. Right. I'm taking 8 to 14 people. I'm taking them to my friends. My phone's not like other people's phones. My Rolodex isn't like other people's Rolodex, like the kids know what the hell of a Rolodex is.
Right, yeah,
but
exactly.
It's like, my phone is, my contacts are world-class winemakers, are world-class chefs like yourself, or hospitality professionals from all over the world, and because those are the people I know and I've worked with for my entire career. And I use those contacts to get us into the greatest wineries in Barolo and hang out in their cellars, and we're tasting from barrels with the winemaker, and we're hanging out and eating in the grandma's house, and she's cooking dinner for us. Nona's making dinner for us. We're hunting truffles, in the afternoon, and then shaving it over our pasta that we just made 4 hours later. I laugh at the concept of farm to table, because number one, if it didn't come from a farm, where the hell did it come from? A freezer, dumbass. I mean, so farm to table.
Yeah.
But it's like, I always say farm to table can bite me, because we went literally truffle hunting. We went from dog's mouth to our mouth in 3 hours in Piemonte 2 weeks ago. So it's like what's cooler than that, right? You hunt the truffles, and then you make the pasta with grandma, and then you're shaving the truffles over the fresh pasta, like right there in the same day. Yeah. So that's sort of cool. And we do cool stuff, like I'll rent boats, and we'll do cruises around the lake, and go have fresh lake fish for dinner on an island in the lake, and we'll do wine tasting while we're riding out across the lake and stuff like that. And it's just things in small villages and small historic medieval walled-in castles that people just don't have access to. And I use that to my advantage, and it's a trip like no other. My demographic is honestly like 80% super power women, really is. It's the JP Morgan vice presidents who make tons of cash but work 50 hours, 50 weeks out of the year, and like come home with their fresh foods, take out, and they put their shoes up, and they're like, turn on Bourdain or Travel Channel, like, I want to do that when I get my 2 weweeks this year. And so they don't have time to plan it. They call me, and they're like, Heath, make this shit happen. And that's what I do. So it's funny. Half of my clientele is lawyers, and the other half is HR directors. The two people I try to stay away from my entire career, and now they're like going everywhere in the world with me. It's so ridiculous. It's so ridiculous.
And Heath,
we do a lot of time. Go ahead.
And sorry, I was going to say the places specifically. So Spain, Italy, where are those the two central areas that you go to?
I go all over the world. I spend a lot of time in Italy. I'll be in Sicily the first week of May with a group. And I think we're actually going to get to have dinner at one of the sets from The Godfather, which is badass.
Wow.
Yeah, how cool is that, right?
Yeah.
And then I do a lot of time in Italy. I do a lot of time in Spain. I do good amounts in France, Chile, obviously California, Virginia. upstate New York, the Finger Lakes. So anywhere there's dope juice and food, we'll go. I mean, we're just looking
Okay.
for a reason to party. Yeah.
So you are doing some domestic wine growing areas as well, which is pretty cool. And I'm right here in Northern Virginia, and when I moved here, I didn't realize like how robust the wine and actually breweries as well. The
Yeah.
industry is like pretty full throttle here. Are there any of those areas that you kind of look that I don't know that you kind of look forward to going back? I mean, I know obviously from cooking over the years and doing a lot of international cooking competitions. I mean, I have these memories from being in France and cooking at the Bocuse d'Or, but some of the things that like I remember the most about those areas aren't the ones that would be obvious, like, doing the actual competition. Instead, I remember I was telling my father-in-law the other day, I was showing him some Le Creuset cookware, and I said, when I was in France, I was eating at Danielle Ballou's mom and dad's house, and they had this Le Creuset. You could tell it was a real old one, and she had this braise going, and I thought it was so cool. She had a little wine cork that was like kind of wedged in the little handle on the Le Creuset, so that it was almost kind of like her little way of not getting burned. But it's like being in the house and seeing that and smelling the food. Then Danielle's dad took us into his little cellar, and he had some wine in there, and all these preserved things that he had, vegetables and stuff. But it's like that's the stuff in places like Italy and France that I feel like when I go there, it's not all the where the sightseers go. It's kind of more just the culture, like the people that is like so cool. But are there any of those areas to you that is kind of like a top of the list or a favorite place to go?
Yeah, well, first of all, let me backtrack a second there because it's going to be pretty tough for me to talk after that major freaking name drop at Danielle Ballou's parents' house in the wine cellar. Yeah, so you can bite me on that one, Chef. But I'm going to continue on, as frustrated as it's going to be for me. Yeah, I think you summed it totally up. It's the same thing as we're hanging out in people's 8-room Airbnb or not Airbnb, bed and breakfasts or private resorts or whatever. They give us attention. We're hanging out with the owners. The owner's mom will be like, Heath, since it's your group, why don't you guys come to the house? And one of my favorite places is Panicale in Umbria. And the grandma lives on an olive farm where they make their own olive oil. And so the last night she'll invite my groups out, and we'll actually sit under the olive trees and the moon, and they'll do a whole pig for us, very Umbrian classic style. And we're just hanging out with the family and the workers from the resort, and the chef is cooking right there for us. And it's the same thing. How can you beat that? And the grandma is like probably in her 80s now, and she just thinks I'm the cutest, most adorable thing because obviously she's lost a lot of her senses. But she makes her own homemade liqueur, and she knows that I know where it is and that I would love it, And so she'll always be like toward the end of dinner, she'll start looking over at me, and I'm just like, I see the eye. I know what we're doing here, Grandma. And because I'll go sneak off and get the Nutello, and then we'll come back and we'll do a couple of shots. Unfortunately, then we'll also start dancing in the middle of the olive orchard. So that's not obviously the best thing that happens. But yeah, same. It's like stuff that you just can't replicate. Nobody else can touch. And, hanging out in Lyon's one thing, and going to Bocuse and the hall and all that, that's badass. Everybody wants to do that. But going to the next level and going to the people's homes and hanging out with them and seeing the culture, feeling the culture, that's what really travel's all about, right? I mean, you can't beat that. So that's the gig. So.
And Heath, I know when you launched your Heathen line of wine, obviously I was super excited, having known you for years. Awesome. And you've got the red, and then I want you to kind of talk about both of those. But before you even kind of do like a little explanation of like what is the flavor profiles, the notes. I obviously, like, whenever you got it in and we started selling it at Roots, which we still have, we sell it at Roots routinely. I have some in my wine cooler, but I kind of like the idea of being able to pair wine with like everyday meals, things. And I feel like you're kind of one of the only people that when I talk to you about pairing wine, that you talk a lot about, this is great with like, a pig cooked on the la cucina, or this is great with paella, or this is good with barbecue or burgers. So my question would be and this is for a lot of our audiences, like, do you have to drink wine with like high-end meals? Does it have to be served with Dover sole? What are some of your views on that? And how does somebody that maybe cooks, like most people do, more everyday fare in America, like how do they incorporate wine into some of those meals? Like, how do you shop for if you're pairing something with a burger or brisket for dinner?
Man, I wish you would have been with me at the gig I did last night up in Huntsville, because I could have just recorded me tableside and answered this entire question. And I don't have to say a word right now, because literally that was what half the conversation was about. And since we're talking about it, and not to be a plug, but this guy right here, my red wine, everybody's like, how do you come up with that blend? And I'll read the back label to you in a minute, because exactly what you just said. I was stupid enough to actually put that in writing on the back label, because I'm a moron. So, growing up in North Alabama, what the hell's Chateaubriand? What the hell is freaking surf and turf? I mean, what is anything? What is escargot? Are you kidding me? I mean, who knew anything about tartare? We're
Right.
eating fried chicken. We're eating fried okra. We're eating collard
Sloppy
greens.
Joe. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's cornbread.
Yeah. Cornbread. Hell yes, cornbread. Buttermilk. It's like dessert was buttermilk and cornbread after dinner on Sunday night. I mean, that's the kind of craziness, right? And so, when I go back to the events that I did, and, working in all these fancy 5-star resorts and restaurants with tablecloths everywhere, wearing a tuxedo, you spend so much time worrying about what do you pair with the tornado Rossini? What are the black truffles or white truffles? I mean, what kind of wine are we using in the demi? Shit that's absurd to the rest of the world, but the stuff that you and I made a profession on, right?
Right.
And so I was walking around doing all these events with like world-class pit masters, barbecue pit masters. And these dudes got 200-pound hogs that they smoked 24 hours the night before. And, and they're doing, just everything off the smoker and the barbecue and whatever. And I'm like, it's cool that I'm pouring world-class Bordeaux with this, or world-class Burgundy or Chianti with this, but the wines don't really work that well with the food. They're just name recognition, and it's a reason to charge a hell of a lot more.
Right.
And that's how I sort of started the concept of Cuvée Primisi, because I wanted stuff that went with pulled pork barbecue, smoked brisket, fried chicken, because that's how we eat. When's the last time you sat down and had a 5-course Italian meal? Or when's the last time I was going to say something about French, but I forgot you were at Danielle's house with his parents. But, so I wanted wines that were easy to access, red wines that you put a little chill on, that you can use with a spicy, smoky, somewhat sweet, somewhat acidic barbecue sauce. No, wines don't handle that, right? But I'm making wines that actually work in that realm.
Right.
And the white wines, as a chef, you'll love this. The white wine I look at as being just super fresh, super zesty, super scintillating, and highly acidic, because to me, it's the squeeze of lemon on your oysters. To me, it's that when you finish your Alfredo sauce and you come in with the lemon zest or a little half squeeze of lemon, and it lightens everything up and gives it acidity and balance, right?
Right.
And to me, the wines are giving the balance to the food and vice versa. And that's the way I want them to play. So I look at wine the same way you as a chef look at food. You need acid, you need texture, you need aromatics, you need lift, you need whatever. Wine's the same way. Bitter, sweet, aromatics, body weight, all those same things work hand in hand. And so that's the way I sort of approach the whole thing. So why not have a freaking badass wine with a burger? I mean, who doesn't love a burger and badass wine,
Yeah. And, honestly, speaking of the white, whenever I ordered some of the white, and actually, I thought I was opening up a red. I was over to cabinet, open it, and I was like, oh, this is some of Heath's the white, and I opened it up, and I thought it exceeded my expectations. I mean, I knew it was going to, expected it was going to be great, but I thought it was really like crisp, and it was bright. So when you say like the acid. And actually, I had it with like some fried chicken and mac and cheese, because that's and it was great. And I think that for a lot of people out there that they think of wine as maybe kind of a little bit intimidating, or they feel like, wow, that's kind of more highbrow. It's actually, I feel like it's almost kind of like reinvigorated or kind of piqued my interest even more, like pairing up wine with, I love, as you know, we do these high-end wine dinners. They're great. They're fun. But I I almost like get just as excited, you know, like, hey, what am I going to serve with like this paella, or what am I going to serve with this grilled tomahawk? And you know, I mean, it's like it's just a different experience, and it works. It works. And I think a lot of people, maybe they feel intimidated because of just the, you know, the stigma or whatever. It can be a little intimidating walking through the wine aisle. But yeah, absolutely. What about what would you say as far as like with getting into like pre and post pandemic? A lot of things have changed. We actually, you know, we've seen like, you know, business kind of starting to come back in catering, restaurants. Yes. You know, people obviously, you know, happy to be back out and everything like that. But have you seen like post pandemic? One of the things I would say would be like with inflation, I've seen prices of a lot of things going up. I mean, me personally, I don't feel like I've seen that as impacted on wine prices as much, but I have seen some of the wines that I buy start to go up a little bit, but I don't feel like it's been as aggressive. But have you seen like the post-pandemic world? I mean, how has that impacted, or has it been minimal, with the whole wine industry and your business and wine production and all of that?
Well, first of all, you're probably not the right person to ask about wine pricing because I pick all your wines out and you pay wholesale. So you're really not the person to talk
Right.
about
True.
So you're
Okay.
not a
Well,
fair
I do
comparison.
buy some wine whenever I go out to, you know, I add some stuff onto Instacart and stuff, Heath. So yes, you may buy, you know, you pick the majority of it, but
Um,
that's a good point.
yeah, you're not a fair comparison. But the rest of the world, the real world, you know, it is there. I mean, during the pandemic, so many things happened. You know, winemakers couldn't get bottles. There weren't enough bottles going around. You know, and everything
Really?
was sitting in. Yeah, and there were in the pandemic world. You know, everybody, a lot of people had a major collapse, myself included. And you know, the one thing that did really strive and go up was alcohol consumption and wine consumption. And you know as
Yes.
well as I do, everybody's sitting at home staring at the computer going, oh, what do we do now? We should drink. And you know what else we
Right.
should do? We should drink more. And yes, we should go ahead and drink more. So that was actually a pro for the wine community. It was probably also a pro eventually for Betty Ford, but that's a different conversation. But you know, there's a pros and cons to it all. You know, containers weren't running on time, and I remember talking to a lot of importers, and I still see this that you know, I'm like, hey, when did you think you're gonna have these types of wines coming from Austria? When's this juice coming in from France, whatever? And they're like, it hit a container 3 weeks ago and it's sitting in a port. And I'm like, what do you mean? And they're like, well, you know, they don't have enough people to work the port. They don't have enough people to run the containers. And then the price just went up double on me. And then they just called me back a week later and said this went up triple on me. But they were holding everybody captive because they could do anything they wanted to. So it hit everybody. It hit every direction. A lot of, and you know, there was a major thing about, you know, they passed an embargo or whatnot, you know, during the presidency with Trump, and you know, they wanted to start taxing everybody off the top, and it was crushing all these small importers because these guys are trying not to raise their prices.
Right.
And then their prices are going up on all their imports and all their gas and all their shipping or whatever. And then they're saying, okay, well, since it's a super high end thing that affects, you know, Europe or whatever, as soon as it hits the dock, we're going to charge you an extra 20% or whatever that was, 50% of it, you know, whatever. And finally, they finally got it to go away. As a small importer, it's a, you know, second generation family, and you've got 10 employees or less. And all of a sudden you're looking at your income last year, you know, before anything was 2.7 million. And all of a sudden they want 20 to 30% off the top of that.
Wow.
How you doing anything, right? How you feeding the kids? I mean, it's time to go to Lowe's and get a freaking night job, right? I mean,
Right.
it's so it hit everybody across the board. It just might not have been so in your face on certain levels, but there was a lot of different things. I look at some of the stuff that's going on in the world today. You look at our friends in Chile right now with fires. You look at our friends in California and the West Coast every
Yes.
year with fires and earthquakes and whatnot.
Right.
And you know, in Virginia, they get frost before May, before the buds set in their grapes almost every other year. And those things affect what these people as farmers depend on as their livelihood day in and day out.
Right.
And all of a sudden, do they even have a crop in 2021? Are they dependent on trying to get extra crop out of 2020 and 2022? Is there extra juice to buy that other people have grown that they can actually put their label on? I mean, it's mind blowing.
Right.
And it's hitting the bottom line for everybody. Trust me. I sort of went on a rant there. Sorry about that, but
No,
it's
that's exactly what I'm looking for. I mean, I also feel like, again, not to start getting into some of these political or various
no politics,
types.
no religion. No
Right.
politics, no religion. No.
Well, with the whole environment conversation about climate change, we hear a lot about how maybe like in Australia or Florida, some of the negative aspects of how aggressive storms are and additional water. But also there could be maybe some benefits for an extended growing season, maybe some areas that maybe weren't able to grow wine are able to, but maybe you have some areas that were producing wine and it's less productive. So it's interesting. And even as you mentioned, even just like with wildfires and stuff like that, these are things that people don't really even think about that do impact the price. It impacts the availability of certain things. And it's kind of interesting to have that as a factor, but it's super relevant.
It's funny. I don't want to cut you off, but I do want to jump in on that because it's something that's really important in my aspect as a head wino to talk about is that we can go back to 1984. I think in Australia, they passed a series of laws that they were talking about doing climate studies and change and whatnot. And they literally over a 20-year span saw the alcohol content go up. And don't hold me exactly to the numbers. I did grow up in Alabama, so I might not get this math right. But they actually were looking at an increase in like 1.5% alcohol in like a 20-year range. So the average alcohol content in a bottle of wine would say around 13%. And then over that like 20 years, because of the heat, the climate, and whatever, blah, 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 longer growing seasons, styles of wine as well, the way wines are made because of certain reasons, but we won't get into that. But the alcohol content went up like almost 1.5%.
Wow.
And that's a huge jump, especially when you're thinking about something as base level as something like, I'm going to have 2 glasses of wine with dinner and then I'm going to get in the car. Well, if your alcohol content in your wine just went from 13 to 14.5,
that's
at a 150-pound dude, well, obviously I have been a 150-pound dude since third grade, so maybe you, not me, but it's like somebody was to do that in an hour's time and get behind the wheel. That's like the same thing as doing a couple of shots of whiskey. And I mean, you think about that, and it's a thing. It's a major thing. And
wow.
So you'll see. I'm working on another thing for Heathen wines right now, where I'm thinking about moving my red wine from California up to like the Pacific Northwest. And one of the major reasons I want to do that is I want to use the same grapes, but I wanted my alcohol content to come down to like 13.7 or 13.8 instead of 14 plus, because I think it makes the wines more food friendly and makes them more accessible. I also think it allows you to have that second or third glass with dinner and not be shook to drive. And, you have to think about those things in my mind as things that are going to affect everybody around you. I think a lot of the millennials and the younger generations are turned off a little bit by wine at 14.5, 15% alcohol because they can only have one glass. And they're thinking about the effects that it actually has on the world and on the footprint and, just different things that, because they're so, I'm not going to use the word woke, but they're woke. And it's these things that affect, they're thinking of these things that, across the board, so.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point and interesting observation. I mean, I haven't even really thought about that, but that is that's a pretty significant jump. I mean, from an entire percent when you're talking about 13 to 14.5 is significant. What about, you've heard all these things in the fine dining world, especially like with Noma announcing that they were going to close. I mean, I know even though the wine is very approachable and you're doing a lot of like, more themed dinners that are kind of more approachable fare. But what's your view on like high-end wine dinners and fine dining? And I'm just kind of curious as somebody that's kind of in the industry, like, do you have any perception on like how you feel like, fine dining? Do you feel like people are always going to want fine dining and still doing those, truffles and Dover sole and what have you?
Before I get into that, I just realized, are you wearing a football jersey?
Yeah, I got a Raiders.
Are you wearing a uniform? I put on a freaking cardigan for you, and you're wearing a Raiders uniform. What the hell's this about? I'm over here like Mr. freaking Rogers in the neighborhood with a cardigan on, and you show up wearing colors from Vegas. What the? Oh
the Raiders,
God.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go back to the question. You're on time now, right? Jesus. So, so fine dining, man. I mean, the funny thing is again, from our past, our history, and all the other chefs we've worked with, some of the greatest chefs in the country and the world. I think the story is that we started seeing 20 years ago, and it still keeps going today. Is we already touched on it. You're Mr. Bocuse d'Or, you're Mr. Master Chef, Rich Rosendale, yada yada yada. We can sit here and count medals and accolades for days, right? What's your favorite thing in the world to do right now? Barbecue cooking classes. To go down to Roots and throw something on the smoker out back, and just slather some ribs and just get dirty with that in a cold beer, right? And how many chefs do you know that came up in Michelin 3-star and 5-star resorts, whatever, that they now own the best burger joint in town? Because that's what everybody goes back to, right? Nobody wants to see another damn tablecloth their entire life, right? And so,
it's craveable.
And I think it's one of those things. Fine dining is never going to die, because there's always going to be a need for somebody who wants to be snobby as hell and go in there and spend $500 and have that experience. I do it once a year just to remember why the hell I don't want to do it anymore. But and the reality of it is again, going to places like Italy and Spain and realizing that the greatest meal you're ever going to have is sitting there with 3 generations of a family and the kids screaming. So you're putting a little bit of wine on its gums, and his brother-in-law just came back from his mistress's house. So you're trying not to kill him in front of your sister, but you better not walk in the same room with you when she's not looking. And it's all the family affairs and the banter of the day and the whatever. But at the end of the day, it's simple food, it's homemade, it's fresh, and it's about the conversation and the love in the room, or whatever the crap that is. I don't talk to my family, so I'm not really sure about that. But it's about that. And I think that's way better to do over dim sum and Chinese takeout than it is to do over a meal where you don't feel like talking because you're scared that the table next to you might overhear your conversation, or you might upset the lead server and the sommelier, right? I mean, it's just I just think people are over it, So I don't know. My viewpoint, but I grew up in a trailer park, so what the hell I know. So.
Well, and I think that it's like we still do a lot of high-end events and stuff like that, but it's it's not every day. And I always kind of like to think of the cooking that we do is almost kind of more like an accordion. It's like, hey, we can go right here and very narrow and be if you want us to do something really high end and luxury, we can do that. But we also can expand and do very broad market appeal or large volume, because that's the kind of stuff that people are eating every day. And it's one thing to, I think back like when I ran the tavern room at the Greenbrier, and I was serving like 60 to 80 guests every day. And I think I used like 60 pounds of butter for every service as well. I'm not sure how that worked out, but
thank you for that. My arteries, thank you for that. Yeah.
But then, I look at a place like Roots or some of the other events that we do, and, we're serving sometimes, 800 meals, it's like, it's a lot more people, and trying to keep the same quality. It's just applied to a different food, a different cuisine. And, I kind of like that. I think it's kind of like, and it's also approachable, even like when we were at the Greenbrier, as you were mentioning, it was like, even though we had casual places, like you go to Draper's and get a burger, or you can get room service, you can go somewhere and get a pizza, but everything there was fine dining. It just, the place was fine dining, it was like a luxury resort. So I find that I get so many more visitors, people that are passing through Northern Virginia, and they'll stop and see us at Roots or at Forklift. And, it's like it's like more people passing through, and they feel like they can come in and they can have jeans or a football jersey or what have you, and they feel like completely comfortable, versus, you didn't really get those kind of visitors when you're at like, a resort like that, because it just feels, really high end,
it's not accessible,
absolutely.
And that's the key word, is accessible. And we see it in food and wine all the time. And it's like, that's why these younger kids and generations don't care about wine or don't want to get into fine dining, is, it's not accessible to them. It's not cheap to start with. It's probably not the way they were brought up in single parent homes or whatever and things like that. It's just not the world that the boomers and everybody else above us lived in or lives in. And, you know, it's like, why pay attention to that when it doesn't apply to them? They don't care anymore.
Right.
And, you know, and we've done it to ourselves a lot. The CIA and Johnson and Wells and the Food Network and all that stuff. We've done it to ourselves. We shot ourselves in the foot. Everybody looks like us, middle-aged white dudes who are fucking blowhards and full of themselves. And, you know, we've run kids to the vape store and to the hard seltzers because why the hell would they want to pay attention to your filet mignon and my freaking first growth Bordeaux? You know, who gives a
Right.
crap? We
Right.
did it to ourselves, you know?
Right. Yeah. And I actually, you know, I do a lot of, as you know, like when I'm traveling and stuff like that, I do a lot of different speaking engagements, and I talk, you know, one of the things is even talking to other chefs and kind of saying like, listen, I don't actually, you know, look at somebody in a younger generation and get mad because maybe they don't want to do what I did. It's like, listen, I understand. I kind of get it. You know, it's like, and I'll tell usually other chefs that are like struggling, looking for help, or it's like, man, you know, I can't get anybody, and they're pointing fingers. It's like, listen, you know, you've got to come up with a really compelling reason for somebody to want to come and work for you.
Yeah.
And what's the runway? What's the growth opportunity? And what's going to be exciting? And how are they going to learn? How are they going to grow? What, you know, and you know, and it's just like, no, people don't want to go and do, like, you know, I went through and did 2-3 year apprenticeships. I don't really see that a whole lot anymore. It's like, you know,
No.
and I understand why, you know, it's like just such a massive sacrifice. So,
Yeah,
but
no, I mean,
yeah, go ahead.
I don't want to get off target because I know you got another question, or you want to go change into another jersey or something like that. But
I got my Steelers jersey here somewhere.
I was about to say, could you find somebody who's actually going to play this weekend? Do you have any of those in your closet?
I don't even follow football, to be honest with you, that much. I mean, I got the Raiders one because we done some Raiders events.
You gig at the Coliseum, you gig at the stadium, right?
You're right. Yeah.
You're like house talent, so they just give you all the swag, right?
Yeah,
so,
yeah,
exactly. Yeah, it's like you see Britney Spears walking around with free shit from the win or whatever. You know, it's like she just takes whatever's in the dressing room, right? So, but you know, I have no idea what I was about to comment on, so just to move on because I started cracking jokes and I forgot.
So.
But, yeah.
One of the things I wanted to ask you, we got time here for a couple more questions, and then I want to, and if feel free afterwards, you know, people are going to want to know where they can learn more about the tours and all that stuff. But a couple more questions, Heath, is do you feel like there's are there any places around the country or maybe even in the world that you feel like have really stepped up their winemaking game, whether those are regions, or are there any wineries, or are there just places that you're anywhere that you're really kind of excited about, or a type of wine now that has kind of like piqued your interest more in the last couple of years?
Hell yeah. We could be here for days. So as you know, like during the pandemic, I was hiding out a lot in Virginia, in Charlottesville, in the Monticello wine region. And, you know, got a lot of winemaker friends there. And I've done, when we were at the Greenbrier, that sort of became my pet project because I could sneak over there in 2 or 3 hours on a day off if we could get one of those.
Right.
And, you know, just go hang out in wine country. And I've seen them elevate their games in the last 10 to 15 years to world-class status. I mean, they're some of the best winemakers in the world over there. They figured out what grapes to grow. They know that they don't need to be planting Cabernet Sauvignon. They don't need to be playing with much Pinot Noir, but they can do great things with Cabernet Franc. They can do great things with Sauvignon Blanc. I've even got a secret project, which I guess is not a secret anymore, that I'm working on. Yes, exactly. Hint, hint. That I'm working on for Heathen Wines. That'll be debuting about a year from now. And it's coming out of Virginia from one of the best winemaker couples in the country. So obviously I feel pretty strong about it. I'm rolling the dice and throwing some cash at it. Not a lot. But the Finger Lakes, of course, everybody knows that's old hat by now. I'm also thinking about doing a thing around Columbia Gorge, right on the Washington-Oregon border there for my red blend. But you got to remember, all 50 states have produced wine now. There's even wine in Alaska. There's even wine in Hawaii. Absolutely. I didn't say it was good, but all 50 states produce wine. There's super dope juice in New Mexico, super crisp shit in Arizona, some super gnarly stuff in Texas. Michigan, knocking it out of the park with like some Rieslings and some sparkling wines. I've had some Pinot Noir from Idaho that is just off the charts. I mean, it's legit. There's a lot of stuff going on, but understanding what to plant, how to grow it, how the climate, all those things are going to affect it is a huge, huge thing that's really overtaken the world. And so, yeah, no, I'm excited about a lot of stuff. Canada's crushing some stuff. Everybody
Really?
talks about everybody talks about Argentina. I want to go to Chile. You know, I think the wines are even better in Chile than they are in Argentina. I'm about to get hate letters from everybody in Mendoza right now. You know, it's just the unknown regions in Spain, places like Sardinia, Slovenia, just on and on and on. The Republic of Georgia, where it was some of the original plantings started, Moldova. It's a freaking great time to be in the booze and wine world, just like it is the food world. It just depends
Right.
on getting out of your lane and looking at other options and not sticking to the filet mignon and mashed potato gig at every country club in the freaking world, right? I mean, it's like going farther and looking around. So it's a great time. It really is.
And
Great farm too.
and would you say, obviously, because I'm in Northern Virginia, just to hone in on that, do you think that the evolution of the quality, do you think that that is, and you mentioned some of it is like picking the right grapes, but it's also like the experience, it's like, it's one of those things where, you get better and better, and it's like it becomes like a family affair. And even just like with cooking, it's like the knowledge kind of passing that down. I mean, I didn't realize, when I came here, like how much winery. I knew of the ones that you had mentioned just from being in close proximity, living at the Greenbrier. But I came here and it's like, man, there's like wineries everywhere. Like, it's like and a lot of them are small places just doing pretty small production. But do you think it's a combination of, the experience and the technique? And I feel like the other big one you mentioned is the type of grape, because they are really like different varieties are going to thrive in different climates.
Yeah, your backyard is not the same as my backyard, is not the same as Daniel Balud's family's backyard. Okay, so
Right.
talk about our three favorite backyards. So where you are in Virginia in the middle of summer, it gets soupy. It's humid as
Yes.
hell. Grapes don't like that. Grapes like Grenache and Pinot Noir and some other grapes. They don't thrive in that environment because their bunches are super, super tight. So what happens when that humidity sets in on them? All of a sudden, everybody starts to sweat, right? And everybody gets moist in there, and everything gets all damp. And guess what? Then the sun starts beating on it, and all of a sudden you've got mildew. All of a sudden you got fungus, and you've got all
Wow.
these things that are actually going to eat and kill the grapes, right? So you think about something like Cabernet Sauvignon, and we'll stick with Virginia. So does it like humidity? It's not scared of humidity. It hates clay. There's clay in almost all the soil that runs around most of Virginia. I'm not going to say this stereotypically is 100% because that would prove me to be a bigger idiot than most people think I am. But it's one of those things. And so the fact that winemakers and owners have figured out that certain things just don't work there, just because I read about it on the cover of the Wine Spectator and I live in Maryland, doesn't mean that I can make Cabernet Sauvignon or Merlot in Maryland the way they do in Napa, or vice
Right.
versa. You probably also couldn't take something like Saval Blanc or whatever, or Petit Manseng, and crush it in Napa the way you could in Virginia. So it's just a different world of reasoning and recognition. And
Right.
that's what this newer generation and our generation of winemakers have learned, because they're able to see so much more and study so much more instead of just having to wait to go through 30 different vintages like their parents did. This
Right.
is a great anomaly of wine that's just concentrated. So
I know we're coming up here on the hour, so I probably got time for maybe one more question. Um,
is the
so
question going to be, why is there a cow on the picture behind me? Because I don't know the answer to that. I just wanted to just throw that
I
out. I
honestly
don't know.
probably wouldn't have you told me that right at the beginning of the interview, and it probably would have like hit me like halfway through, and I probably would have been like, what the hell? But so yeah, I think, my last question, I'd like to know, like, where, if people are interested in the wine, Heath, where is it distributed at? Obviously we have it at Roots, but if you're not there, what is it? Can you get it online? Is it in certain states? And then also, if you can maybe just give people some insight as to if they want to learn more about the wine tours, and of course where they can find out more about you.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to get some promos on that. I appreciate it. I'm giving you no kickbacks, by the way, either. You get nothing from me. Yeah, unless
I owe
you can
you,
give
man.
me.
You've been picking out all these great wines for me. So,
Yeah, well, if you can give me an invite to Danielle's parents' house next year, I'll take that as a
yeah,
kickback.
yeah,
All
yeah.
right, how
Next
about
time
that?
I'll definitely do that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll bring the juice. I'll bring the juice. All right, Heathen for everybody. Did you see me rolling into France with the bottles of Heathen?
Yeah,
I'll
man, I
be
could
so
totally see it.
excited.
Yeah, we'll
Yeah,
take
well,
it on the plane.
you know me, you could see it, but they would not like that. So Heathen Wines, I'm distributed in 7 states: Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, South Carolina, Virginia, Rhode Island. Hawaii is opening up now. Miami, even though Miami's not a state legally, but
I was gonna
might
say
as well be.
Florida. I feel like I've seen some in
Florida.
Florida. Yeah.
Yeah. Florida's one of my biggest markets. Just opened up Alabama in the last 3 days, and I've already sold out of everything in the warehouse here. So it was a great week up here.
Very cool.
Yeah, I can con these guys into anything. They think I'm like one of them. It's so weird. And so I've got the 2 wines now, and I'm working on a couple more SKUs. So I'm hoping to have 4 wines within the year that'll represent small regions that people don't know, like the Finger Lakes, the Virginias, the Walla Wallas, Santa Rita Hills, where my wife's from. We don't. There's enough Napa and Sonoma in the world. Nothing against those wines, but it's like there's great juice being pumped out a lot of other places too. Heathen Wine Tours is the website, and I've got myself and my fat mug up there. You can see a lot of things I do, like consulting and wine entertainment, and also my wines and the trips that I do. I do private tours and public tours, so you could actually call me and say, hey, I got 3 other couples that want to go, and let's sign up for 8 people to go to Sardinia or to freaking Corsica or wherever you want to go, and we set the budget, we set the dates, and we roll. So that's an easy one, heathenwinetours.com. And wines, actually, you can also get the wines on e-commerce. That's on my website as well. So you can have them delivered to your door in like 42 states, which is pretty cool.
Oh, great. I didn't know
that's
that.
really cool. Yeah, no, that just when I did. That just happened like in the last couple of months. So I'm super stoked about that. And I've been blessed that some really cool cats and some really cool places are carrying the juice. I mean, since you were Danielle and name dropping, I'll just go ahead and do some name dropping over here. It's like I got the Heathen has been in like John George by the Glass.
That's awesome.
It's been in like
in
it's
Virginia,
been in like Salamander Resort, Resort, and a bunch of 5-star resorts. And it's like, go ahead.
Awesome.
There's some cool stuff. I think they're pouring it at Keller's Surf Club down on the beach, and stuff like that. And Michael's Genuine, who's Mr. James Beard himself, and whatever. So I just put it in Hot and Hot in Birmingham, who's Mr. James Beard, best chef in the South multiple times, and on and on. So there's some cool stuff going on. I'm a little bit humbled by the whole situation. You never know that to talk to me or look at me, but it's the grind is real. I'll just leave it at that. So from one grinder to another. So.
And that's awesome, man. And definitely keep me posted on the that Virginia wine collaboration. That sounds really cool. I'm really excited to learn about that, and especially whenever it becomes available. And thanks for sharing that news on the show.
Actually, maybe we'll do something for Valentine's Day next year and do a kickoff for it, because it's going to be
very cool,
pretty cool and eclectic, and that would be a good time to kick it off and do something sort of hoity-toity, pinkies out. So
Awesome. Well, thank you, Heath Porter. Obviously, always a pleasure to spend time with you, whether we're doing a podcast or spending time in person. And always enjoyed knowing you over the years, and learned a lot on the show, and look forward to continuing the conversation offline next time I see you.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me, Chef. Always cool to hang out and talk smack, and be one of the few people who actually is not scared to call you names in the same room, because everybody else wants to run and hide. So
we've known each other for a while, so yeah.
Yeah,
all right,
and
man.
Yeah, exactly. So cool. Thanks. Have a great one, Chef. I appreciate it.
You too. All right, buddy. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Hey, everybody, just want to say thank you for joining us on another episode of the Let's Dig In podcast. I want to say thank you to our guest this week, Heath Porter. Check out his website, some of his wine tours. If you're looking for a really cool getaway and a very personalized, fun time, Heath is definitely going to be a great host. And also, I want to say thank you to all of you for continuing to listen, like, and watch the show. If you want to see some of our past episodes, you can actually watch the video version on Rosendale Collective on YouTube. We have all the past shows and lots of great guests that we've had. You can also go to richrosendale.com, select podcast, and there you can see everywhere that we have the show available. Please like and subscribe. We really appreciate it. It helps us continue to do the show. And I'll see you next week with lots of great content and another great guest. So thanks all and have a wonderful week. Bye-bye.